Tina's heart races as she watches the human enter the crystalline reception hall of her father's Earth-based compound. This is not the weak, submissive creature she expected to inherit. Dennis Webb, former Navy SEAL, and now her property, stands tall and confident despite the armed Vorkarian guards flanking him. His muscular physique and piercing gaze catch her off guard, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. Lord Zaxnar, oblivious to the tension crackling between his daughter and the human, formally transfers ownership. "Tina, this human is now yours to manage. Consider it an early inheritance and a lesson in property stewardship." Tina nods, struggling to maintain her aloof demeanor as Dennis's eyes meet hers. The spark of attraction confuses and intrigues her, challenging everything she's been taught about human inferiority. The compound's AI system quietly registers elevated heart rates and pheromone levels, flagging the interaction for further monitoring. Dennis, outwardly compliant, keeps his expression neutral. Inwardly, his mind races, cataloging every detail of the massive crystalline structure. The hidden resistance transmitter in his cybernetic implant activates, sending encrypted data about the compound's layout to human freedom fighters. Lord Zaxnar continues, unaware of the undercurrents. "He will serve as your personal bodyguard, Tina, a fitting role for a former military human." Tina's eyes widen slightly. Close proximity to this intriguing human was not what she had anticipated. "Yes, father," she manages to respond, her voice steadier than she feels. As Tina leads Dennis to her private quarters, the weight of recent events hangs heavy in the air. It's been only 5 years since the Vorkarian Empire annexed Earth, implementing a feudal system that divided human territories among alien nobles. Families like Lord Zaxnar's now rule over what was once the United States, their massive compound symbols of Vorkarian dominance. Dennis follows silently, his military training evident in his precise movements. At 28, he's a prime example of human resilience and adaptability. Tina, barely 22 by Earth standards, finds herself hyper-aware of his presence behind her. They reach Tina's quarters, a lavish suite that would once have been the envy of human billionaires. Now it's simply another reminder of the stark divide between conqueror and conquered. Tina pauses at the threshold, suddenly unsure. She's dreaded this moment, the responsibility of owning a human, seeing it as a burden. But now, faced with Dennis's strength and the inexplicable pull she feels towards him, her perspective shifts dramatically. She turns to face him, their eyes locking once more. The air between them seems to crackle with unspoken tension. Tina swallows hard, then opens the door to her quarters. "Come in," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. As Dennis steps inside, the door closes behind them. For the first time, they're alone. The vast difference in their stations, owner and property, stands in stark contrast to the mutual attraction neither can deny. In this moment, on opposite sides of an intergalactic conflict, Tina and Dennis find themselves at the precipice of something that could change everything. The fate of two species may well hinge on what happens behind this closed door. As the door closes behind them, the air in Tina's quarters feels thick with unspoken tension. Dennis stands at attention, his military bearing evident despite his new status as property. Tina's eyes roam over him, her earlier confusion giving way to a mix of curiosity and desire. Shaking herself from her reverie, Tina attempts to reassert her authority. "You will stand guard outside my room," she orders, her voice wavering slightly. Before Dennis can respond, a shrill alarm pierces the air. The compound's AI system speaks in its calm, artificial voice. "Security breach detected in lower levels. All personnel on high alert." Lord Zaxnar's voice crackles through the intercom. "Tina, take your new bodyguard and investigate. His military background may prove useful." Tina's eyes widen, realizing this unexpected turn of events will keep her in close proximity to Dennis. She nods curtly, gesturing for him to follow as they exit her quarters and make their way to the lower levels. The crystalline corridors echo with their footsteps as they descend. Dennis's cybernetic implant hums silently, transmitting data about the compound's layout to the resistance. Tina glances at him, noticing the slight furrow in his brow as he scans their surroundings. As they round a corner, they come face to face with a group of human resistance fighters. Their leader, a grizzled man named Marcus, locks eyes with Dennis. Recognition flashes between them, and for a moment the air crackles with tension. "Well, well," Marcus growls, raising his weapon. "Looks like we've got ourselves a traitor." Dennis's mind races, caught between his loyalty to the resistance and his growing feelings for Tina. In a split-second decision, he steps in front of her, shielding her from Marcus's aim. "Stand down," Dennis commands, his voice steady. Marcus's eyes narrow. "You're protecting one of them after everything they've done?" The resistance fighters fan out, their weapons trained on Dennis and Tina. Dennis's muscles tense, ready for action. Tina watches him, her earlier assumptions about human inferiority crumbling in the face of his strength and quick thinking. In a blur of motion, the resistance attacks. Dennis moves with lightning speed, disarming the nearest fighter and using him as a shield. Tina, not to be outdone, reveals her own combat prowess, her Vorkarian reflexes allowing her to dodge and weave through the fray. As they fight, Dennis notices the advanced weaponry carried by the resistance. The guns emit a faint blue glow, and when fired, they seem to disrupt the compound's crystalline structure. He files this information away, knowing its potential importance. Tina finds herself mesmerized by Dennis's fluid movements and tactical mind. She watches as he takes down two fighters with precise strikes, his muscles rippling under his shirt. A warmth spreads through her body, a feeling she's never experienced before. The skirmish ends quickly, with the resistance fighters retreating. As they fall back, Marcus manages to slip a small device into Dennis's hand, unnoticed by Tina. The weight of it in his palm reminds Dennis of the complexities of his position. Breathing heavily, Tina and Dennis find themselves in a maintenance closet, having taken shelter from the retreating fighters. The small space forces them close together, their bodies nearly touching. Tina looks up at Dennis, her eyes wide with adrenaline and something more. Their faces inch closer, the air between them electric. Dennis can feel Tina's breath on his lips, her alien features suddenly the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. Just as their lips are about to meet, the sound of approaching Vorkarian security forces breaks the spell. They spring apart, both flushed and breathing heavily. As they exit the closet, Lord Zaxnar approaches, his face a mix of concern and approval. "You've done well, human," he says to Dennis. "From this moment on, you are my daughter's permanent bodyguard. You will remain by her side at all times." Dennis nods, acutely aware of Tina's presence beside him. She stands straighter, a mix of emotions playing across her face. As they make their way back to Tina's quarters, the compound's AI silently analyzes their interactions, its processors whirring as it develops new algorithms to predict and potentially influence their behavior. Once inside, Tina turns to Dennis, her voice softer than before. "You will sleep in the antechamber," she says, gesturing to a small room adjoining her bedroom. "For security reasons, of course." Dennis nods, understanding the unspoken implications of this arrangement. As he settles into his new sleeping quarters, he feels the weight of the resistance communicator in his pocket. The device serves as a tangible reminder of the dangerous game he now plays, caught between two worlds and his growing feelings for Tina. In her bedroom, Tina lies awake, replaying the day's events in her mind. The image of Dennis protecting her, his strong body shielding her from harm, sends a shiver down her spine. She realizes that everything she thought she knew about humans, about her place in the universe, has been irrevocably changed. As both Tina and Dennis drift off to sleep, neither is aware of the forces aligning around them. The resistance plots their next move. Lord Zaxnar contemplates the diplomatic possibilities of a human Vorkarian union, and the compound's AI quietly accumulates data, its influence on their fledgling relationship yet to be revealed. In the quiet of the night, the seeds of revolution, love, and change take root, promising to alter the course of two civilizations. Dawn broke over the compound, casting a soft glow through the crystalline walls of Tina's quarters. Dennis stirred in the antechamber, his military training snapping him to alertness. He found Tina already awake, pacing nervously in her room. "We have a social gathering to attend today," she said, her voice tinged with apprehension. "You'll need to accompany me as my bodyguard." Dennis nodded, noting the tension in her posture. As they prepared for the event, the air between them crackled with unspoken energy, their near kiss from the previous day still fresh in their minds. The grand ballroom buzzed with activity as Vorkarian nobles and their human properties filed in. Dennis scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats out of habit. Tina clung close to his side, her discomfort palpable as they navigated the crowd. "Ah, young Tina," a deep voice boomed. They turned to see a towering Vorkarian approaching, his eyes fixed on Dennis. "And this must be your new acquisition. Impressive specimen." "Krastor," Tina acknowledged stiffly. "This is Dennis, my personal bodyguard." Krastor circled Dennis, appraising him like a prized animal. "A former military human, I hear. Tell me, Zaxnar," he called to Tina's father, who had just joined them, "what would it take to convince you to part with this one?" Lord Zaxnar raised an eyebrow, considering the proposal. Tina's heart raced, a surge of possessiveness catching her off guard. "Father, Dennis is not for sale," she interjected hastily. "His skills are invaluable to my personal security." As the nobles continued their discussion, Dennis observed the gathering intently. He noticed a pattern in the Vorkarians' communication devices, a rhythmic pulsing of light that could potentially be exploited. He filed the information away, his hidden transmitter quietly relaying the data to the resistance. The evening took a dark turn as a group of intoxicated Vorkarians began tormenting their human servants. Dennis watched, his lips pursed, as the nobles forced the humans to perform degrading acts for their amusement. Tina shifted uncomfortably beside him, her earlier bravado faltering. "This isn't right," she whispered, almost to herself. Suddenly a sharp cry cut through the din. One of the nobles had struck a female servant, sending her sprawling to the floor. Before Tina could react, Dennis was in motion. In a fluid series of movements, he placed himself between the noble and the fallen woman. The room fell silent, all eyes on the human who dared to intervene. "Stand aside, property," the noble snarled, raising his hand to strike again. Dennis caught the Vorkarian's wrist mid-swing, his grip like iron. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but firm. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tina pushed through, her heart pounding. "Dennis was acting on my orders," she declared, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "The safety of all attendees is part of his duties." The tension in the room was palpable as Vorkarians exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked impressed by Dennis's swift action, while others bristled at the perceived insolence. Before the situation could escalate further, a piercing alarm cut through the air. The AI's voice echoed through the compound. "Unauthorized energy surge detected in lower levels. Security personnel to investigate immediately." Lord Zaxnar's eyes narrowed. "Dennis, go with the security team. Your military experience may prove useful." As Dennis prepared to leave, Tina grabbed his arm, pulling him into a secluded alcove. "Be careful," she whispered, her eyes searching his face. "I can't lose you." The intensity of her gaze, the warmth of her touch, it all became too much. In a moment of shared vulnerability, their lips met. The kiss was electric, passionate, and far too brief. They broke apart, both stunned by the intensity of their feelings. Dennis touched his lips, still tingling from the contact. "I'll come back," he promised, his voice husky. As he descended to the lower levels with the Vorkarian security team, Dennis's mind raced. He activated the hidden communicator, alerting the resistance to the potential danger ahead. The weight of his conflicting loyalties pressed down on him. His duty to the resistance, his growing feelings for Tina, and the complex web of deception he now found himself entangled in. The security team moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridors. Dennis's enhanced senses, courtesy of his cybernetic implants, picked up faint sounds ahead. As they rounded a corner, he caught a glimpse of familiar faces, Marcus and his team. In that moment, Dennis realized the true scale of the resistance operation unfolding around him. The choices he would make in the next few minutes could change the course of the human-Vorkarian conflict forever. With his heart pounding and Tina's kiss still fresh on his lips, Dennis stepped forward to face whatever came next. Next, his mind racing with the implications of what lay ahead. The security team moved swiftly through the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing off the crystalline walls. Dennis's enhanced senses picked up faint sounds ahead, the unmistakable hum of advanced machinery and muffled voices. As they rounded a corner, Dennis's breath caught in his throat. Before them lay a hidden outpost, bustling with activity. Resistance fighters worked feverishly over modified Vorkarian tech, their hands deftly manipulating alien components. "Hold position," Dennis whispered to the Vorkarian security team, his military training kicking in. "I'll scout ahead." He crept forward, his cybernetic implants silently relaying data back to his handlers. The outpost was a technological marvel, a fusion of human ingenuity and reverse-engineered Vorkarian advancements. Weapons lined the walls, emanating a faint blue glow that Dennis recognized from the earlier skirmish. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Dennis, is that you?" He turned to see Sarah, Marcus's second-in-command, emerging from a side passage. Her eyes widened as she took in his Vorkarian uniform. "We need to talk," she said urgently, pulling him into a secluded alcove. "The uprising is happening in 48 hours. We need your help." Dennis's mind reeled. 48 hours? Sarah, that's too soon. We're not ready. "We have to act now," she interrupted. "This is our chance to end Vorkarian control over Earth. Are you with us or not?" The weight of her words pressed down on Dennis. Images flashed through his mind. The oppressed humans at the gala, the advanced weapons surrounding him, and Tina's face, her alien features softened by their kiss. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the main chamber. The Vorkarian security team had grown impatient and advanced, discovering the outpost. "We're compromised," Sarah hissed. "Make your choice, Dennis, now!" In the chaos that followed, Dennis found himself caught between two worlds. He helped Sarah and her team escape through a hidden passage, while simultaneously guiding the Vorkarian forces away from critical intelligence. As the dust settled, Dennis knew his actions would have far-reaching consequences. He made his way back to the upper levels, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting loyalties and emotions. Upon entering Tina's quarters, he found her waiting, her posture rigid, and her eyes filled with a mix of anger and hurt. "I saw you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the lower levels, with the resistance fighters." Dennis froze, his heart pounding. "Tina, I can explain." "Can you?" she snapped. "Have you been lying to me this entire time? Using me to gather intelligence for your human rebels?" The hurt in her voice cut Dennis to the core. He stepped closer, reaching out to her. "No, Tina, what I feel for you is real, but I can't stand by and watch my people suffer." Tina's eyes softened and she allowed Dennis to take her hands in his. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about humans, about you." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the tension between them ignited. Tina pulled Dennis close, their lips crashing together in a passionate kiss. They gave in to their desires, their bodies intertwining as they fell onto her bed. In the aftermath of their intimate encounter, Dennis made a decision. He told Tina everything about the resistance, the planned uprising, and the advanced weapons they had developed. To his surprise, Tina listened intently, her expression shifting from shock to understanding. "I've seen how humans are treated," she said softly. "It's not right, but a war between our people would be devastating for both sides." Together they began to formulate a plan. They would use their unique positions to broker a peace between humans and Vorkarians, revealing the truth about human capabilities to the Vorkarian High Command. As they worked, neither noticed the subtle changes in the compound's systems, doors opening at just the right moment, private communication channels remaining mysteriously unmonitored. The AI watched, its processors whirring as it calculated the potential outcomes of their alliance. Meanwhile, in his private chambers, Lord Zaxnar pored over reports detailing Dennis's military background. His eyes narrowed as he connected the dots, suspicion growing with each new piece of information. In another part of the compound, Krasistor smiled to himself as he reviewed surveillance footage of Dennis and Tina's intimate moments. The scandal this would cause could be just the leverage he needed to unseat Zaxnar and claim power for himself. As the hours ticked by, Dennis received an encrypted message from Marcus. The resistance was mobilizing, preparing to strike at the heart of the Vorkarian compound, its power core. Dennis's hand hovered over the communication device, torn between warning Tina and potentially saving Vorkarian lives, or allowing the resistance to gain a crucial advantage. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and time was running out. With willpower in their eyes, Dennis and Tina prepared for the upcoming Vorkarian strategy meeting. They knew their proposal for human-Vorkarian cooperation would be met with skepticism at best, outright hostility at worst. As they made their way to the meeting chamber, alarms blared throughout the compound. The resistance attack had begun, earlier than expected. Dennis and Tina exchanged a look of shock and fear, knowing that their carefully laid plans were about to be put to the ultimate test. The compound shook with the force of an explosion, and chaos erupted around them. As Vorkarian security forces scrambled to respond, Dennis and Tina found themselves at a crossroads, their loyalties and newfound love about to face their greatest challenge yet. The compound shuddered again as another explosion rocked its foundations. Dennis and Tina exchanged a look of willpower before racing towards the strategy meeting chamber. As they ran, alarms blared, and Vorkarian security forces rushed past them, their faces etched with panic. "We need to get to that meeting," Tina shouted over the chaos. "It might be our only chance to prevent this from escalating further." Dennis nodded, his mind racing. He knew the resistance was behind the attack, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with Lord Zaxnar. "Father!" Tina exclaimed. "We need to—" "There's no time," Lord Zaxnar interrupted, his voice stern. "The meeting has been moved to the secure bunker. Follow me." As they hurried after Zaxnar, Dennis noticed a group of elite Vorkarian guards discreetly falling into formation behind them. His instincts, honed by years of military training, told him something was off. The secure bunker was a hive of activity when they arrived. Vorkarian officials huddled around hollow displays, their faces grim as they assessed the damage. Dennis spotted Krazator among them, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto Dennis. Lord Zaxnar called the meeting to order. "We are under attack by human insurgents," he announced. "Our first priority is to secure the compound and neutralize the threat." Dennis stepped forward, his heart pounding. "My lord, if I may," he began, acutely aware of all eyes turning to him. "I believe there's an opportunity here for diplomacy. The humans—" A sudden power fluctuation cut him off, plunging the room into darkness for a moment before emergency lights flickered to life. Murmurs of concern rippled through the gathered Vorkarians. "Enough!" Krazator snarled. "This human has clearly been working with the insurgents. How else could he have known about this attack?" Before Dennis could defend himself, his hidden communicator vibrated against his skin. With a subtle movement, he checked the message. "Lower levels breached. Moving to power core." Dennis's mind raced. He knew he had to act fast to prevent catastrophe. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. "Lord Zaxnar," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I have information about the attackers' next move. They're targeting the power core." The room erupted into chaos. Vorkarian officials shouted accusations of treachery, while others demanded immediate action. Lord Zaxnar raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "How do you know this, Dennis?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Tina stepped forward, placing a hand on Dennis's arm. "Father, please. Dennis has been loyal to us. We must listen to him." For a moment, Lord Zaxnar's eyes flickered between his daughter and Dennis. Then, as if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the compound, confirming Dennis's warning. "Very well," Lord Zaxnar said. "We'll deal with the question of loyalty later. For now, we must secure the power core." As Vorkarian forces mobilized, Dennis turned to Tina. "We need to go down there," he said urgently. "We might be able to negotiate with the resistance, prevent this from turning into a bloodbath." Tina nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and drive. "I'll convince my father to let us lead a team." To their surprise, Lord Zaxnar agreed, but with a condition. "Krazator will accompany you," he said, his eyes never leaving Dennis. "Consider it a test of your loyalty." The unlikely trio, along with a small contingent of Vorkarian guards, made their way to the lower levels. The air grew thick with tension as they descended, the sound of distant fighting growing louder with each step. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Marcus and his resistance fighters. Both sides raised their weapons, the air crackling with potential violence. Dennis stepped forward, his hands raised. "Marcus, wait," he called out. "We're here to talk." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Dennis, what are you doing with them?" "Trying to prevent a war," Dennis replied, his voice steady. "There's a chance for peace here, but we need to stop this attack." As Dennis spoke, he noticed Kraz's Tor reaching for something hidden in his robes. Before he could react, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Dennis felt his muscles seize up, and he saw both humans and Vorkarians around him collapse to the ground, paralyzed. Through the haze of pain, Dennis saw Krazator's triumphant smile fade to shock as the Vorkarian too succumbed to the effects of his own weapon. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a familiar voice echoed through the corridor. "Emergency protocol initiated," the compound's AI announced, "sealing affected area to prevent further conflict." Heavy doors slammed shut around them, sealing Dennis, Tina, Marcus, and Kraztor in the corridor, separated from both their allies and enemies. As the paralysis began to wear off, Dennis struggled to his feet, helping Tina up. Marcus and Kraztor also rose, eyeing each other warily. "Well," Dennis said, looking at the unlikely group, "it seems we have no choice but to talk." Before anyone could respond, a massive tremor shook the compound. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. In the eerie glow of emergency lighting, Dennis realized the situation had just become far more complicated. The Resistance's EMP had been triggered, and now, trapped together in the bowels of the compound, these 4 individuals held the fate of 2 species in their hands. As the reality of their situation sank in, Dennis knew that the real challenge was just beginning. As the reality of their situation sank in, Dennis knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the faces of Dennis, Tina, Marcus, and Kraz's Tor. The sudden silence following the EMP blast was deafening, broken only by the sound of their labored breathing and the distant echoes of chaos throughout the compound. Dennis pushed himself to his feet, his muscles still tingling from the effects of Kraztor's weapon. He reached out to Tina, helping her up. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. "Everyone all right?" Dennis asked, surveying the group. Marcus nodded grimly, while Kraztor let out a low growl of frustration. The Vorkarian official's eyes darted between Dennis and Tina, his suspicion palpable. "We need to restore power," Dennis said, taking charge of the situation. "Without it, this compound will tear itself apart." Tina stepped forward, her alien features set with purpose. "The backup power systems are in the lower levels. I can guide us there." Kraztor scoffed. "And why should we trust you, human sympathizer?" Dennis turned to face the Vorkarian, his voice level but firm. "Because right now we don't have a choice. If we don't work together, everyone loses." Marcus, who had been silently assessing the situation, spoke up. "He's right. We need to put our differences aside for now." With reluctant nods from both Marcus and Kraztor, the unlikely group set off through the darkened corridors. Tina led the way, her knowledge of the compound's layout proving invaluable. Dennis stayed close to her, his military training keeping him alert for any signs of danger. As they navigated through the maze of hallways, they encountered several sealed security doors. Tina approached a control panel, her fingers dancing over the alien symbols. "The EMP fried the circuits," she muttered. "We'll have to manually override it." Dennis stepped up beside her, their bodies brushing against each other in the narrow space. He felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the damaged systems. Pushing the feeling aside, he focused on the task at hand. "Here," he said, pointing to a small access panel. "If we can rewire this, we might be able to bypass the main circuit." Working together, Dennis and Tina managed to hotwire the door. As it slid open with a groan, Marcus couldn't help but be impressed by their teamwork. "You two make quite a pair," he observed, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. Kraztor's face darkened at the comment, but he remained silent as they pressed on. The group encountered more obstacles as they made their way deeper into the compound. They were forced to climb through maintenance shafts to avoid areas of structural damage caused by the EMP. Dennis took the lead, his physical prowess on display as he helped the others navigate the treacherous passages. As they emerged from a particularly tight crawl space, the sound of distant fighting reached their ears. Explosions reverberated through the walls, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. "We're running out of time," Dennis said urgently. "We need to get to those backup systems now." They quickened their pace, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of disoriented Vorkarian guards, their weapons raised. "Stand down!" Krastor barked, stepping forward. "We're here to restore power." The guards hesitated, their eyes darting between Krastor and the humans. Dennis tensed, ready for a fight, but Tina placed a calming hand on his arm. "Please," she said to the guards, her voice steady. "We're trying to prevent further bloodshed. Let us pass." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then slowly the guards lowered their weapons. As Dennis and his group moved past them, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. If a Vorkarian and a human could work together in this crisis, perhaps there was hope for their species after all. Finally, they reached the backup power control room. Dennis and Marcus worked in tandem to subdue the guard stationed there, using non-lethal tactics that left both Tina and Krastor visibly impressed. With the room secured, Tina and Dennis immediately set to work on the power systems. They stood side by side at the main console, their fingers flying over the controls as they worked to reactivate the compound's main power grid. As the systems hummed to life around them, Dennis became acutely aware of Tina's proximity. The adrenaline of the situation, combined with the relief of their success, overwhelmed him. Without thinking, he turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, the culmination of all the tension and attraction that had been building between them. For a moment, the chaos of the compound faded away, leaving only the two of them. The sound of Marcus clearing his throat brought them back to reality. Dennis and Tina stepped apart, their faces flushed. Krastor stared at them, his expression a mix of shock and something that might have been understanding. Before anyone could comment on what they had witnessed, the main lights flickered on, bathing the room in a harsh glow. Dennis quickly moved to the central communication panel. "This is Dennis," he announced, his voice echoing through the compound-wide system. "We've restored power. I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire. Both human and Vorkarian forces stand down. We have an opportunity here for peace." Tina stepped up beside him, her hand finding his. "This is Tina, daughter of Lord Zaxnar. I stand with Dennis. We've seen what we can accomplish when we work together. It's time to end this conflict and begin a new chapter in human-Vorkarian relations." As their united message echoed through the compound, Dennis and Tina exchanged a look of hope and drive. They had taken the first step towards peace, but the real challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The compound around them buzzed with the possibility of change, and for the first time in years, the future held the promise of something better for both humans and Vorkarians alike. The compound buzzed with renewed energy as power surged through its systems. Dennis and Tina's united message echoed through the corridors, their words carrying the weight of hope for a new era of human-Vorkarian relations. In the days that followed, the compound transformed into a hub of intense political and social activity. Word spread quickly of the pivotal role Dennis and Tina played in averting disaster, and their relationship became a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation. Lord Zaxnar, recognizing the potential for change, made a bold move. He called a press conference attended by both human and Vorkarian media to publicly acknowledge Dennis and Tina's relationship. The announcement sent shockwaves through both communities. "In light of recent events," Lord Zaxnar declared, his voice firm and clear, "I have come to see the value of human-Vorkarian cooperation. My daughter Tina and Dennis have demonstrated that our species can work together for mutual benefit. It is time we explore the possibilities of a more integrated future." The impact of Lord Zaxnar's words was immediate. Within hours, plans were underway for a global summit to discuss the future of human-Vorkarian relations. Delegates from both species began arriving from around the world, turning the compound into a melting pot of cultures and ideas. Dennis and Tina found themselves thrust into the spotlight, their every move scrutinized by curious onlookers. As they walked through the compound's main atrium, now bustling with activity, Dennis felt the weight of expectation on his shoulders. "I never thought I'd be at the center of something like this," he murmured to Tina, acutely aware of the eyes following them. Tina squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We're in this together," she replied, her alien features set with willpower. Their new role came with new responsibilities. Lord Zaxnar tasked them with organizing a series of cultural exchange events to foster understanding between humans and Vorkarians. Dennis and Tina threw themselves into the work, their collaborative efforts bringing them closer together. They spent long hours planning activities that showcased the strengths and unique aspects of both species. One day, as they worked late into the night, Dennis found himself mesmerized by Tina's passion and intelligence. "You know," he said, a smile playing on his lips, "I think I'm falling even more in love with you." Tina's skin flushed a deeper shade of blue. "Dennis," she whispered, her eyes darting to the open office door, "we should maintain professionalism." But as their eyes met, the air crackled with unspoken desire. Dennis stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. For a moment they stood frozen, the tension between them palpable. The spell was broken by a knock at the door. They sprang apart as Marcus entered, carrying a stack of reports. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his knowing gaze moving between them, "but we've got a situation." The situation turned out to be a group of human resistance members attempting to sabotage a Vorkarian technology demonstration. Dennis, his military instincts kicking in, quickly assessed the threat. "Tina, alert security," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Marcus, with me." Moving swiftly through the crowd, Dennis approached the would-be saboteurs. He recognized the look in their eyes, the desperation of those who felt they had nothing left to lose. "Stand down," Dennis called out, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "This isn't the way to make things better." The resistance members hesitated, their eyes darting between Dennis and the Vorkarian security forces closing in. In that moment of uncertainty, Dennis acted. With lightning-fast reflexes, he disarmed the leader, using a series of precise movements to neutralize the threat without causing harm. The crowd watched in awe as Dennis single-handedly subdued the resistance members, his actions a testament to both his skill and his commitment to nonviolence. As Vorkarian security took the saboteurs into custody, a ripple of murmurs spread through the onlookers. Tina pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes shining with admiration. "Dennis, that was incredible," she said, her voice filled with emotion. The Vorkarian delegates, impressed by Dennis's display of skill and restraint, gathered around him. One of them, a high-ranking military official, stepped forward. "Your actions today have shown us that humans are capable of great things," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "Perhaps it is time we reconsider our approach to human integration." Tina, inspired by the moment, spoke up. "What if we took it a step further?" she proposed, her voice strong and clear. "What if we integrated humans into Vorkarian military and security forces?" The suggestion caused an immediate stir. Delegates from both species began to debate heatedly, some seeing it as a path to equality, others viewing it as a potential threat. As the discussions intensified, Dennis noticed Krastor lingering at the edge of the crowd, his expression troubled. The Vorkarian official caught Dennis's eye and gave a subtle nod, indicating he needed to speak privately. Dennis made his way to Krastor, curious about what the once hostile Vorkarian had to say. As they stepped away from the crowd, Krastor leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know," he said, his eyes darting nervously. "A faction within the Vorkarian nobility opposes any form of human Vorkarian cooperation. They're led by High Lord Vexthar, and they plan to disrupt the summit." Dennis felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced back at Tina, still engaged in passionate debate with the delegates. The path to peace, it seemed, was far from smooth. Smooth. The revelation hit Dennis like a physical blow, his mind racing with the implications. Before he could fully process the information, a deafening explosion rocked the compound. Alarms blared, their piercing wails cutting through the air. Dennis's enhanced senses kicked into overdrive, his body tensing for action. "It started," Krasistor growled, his eyes narrowing. Dennis sprinted back to Tina, who was already moving towards him. They locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Without a word, they sprang into action, their movements fluid and coordinated. "Marcus, secure the perimeter," Dennis barked, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Tina, we need to lock down the communication systems." As Tina dashed towards the control room, Dennis assessed the situation. His enhanced vision allowed him to see through the smoke and debris, identifying key choke points and potential weaknesses in the compound's defenses. "Krasder, gather any loyal forces you can find," Dennis ordered. "We need to protect the delegates." The Vorkarian nodded grimly and disappeared into the crowd. Dennis turned his attention to the main hall, where panicked delegates were scrambling for safety. He vaulted over a fallen pillar, his hybrid strength propelling him forward with inhuman speed. In the control room, Tina's fingers flew over the holographic interface. She bypassed security protocols with ease, her intimate knowledge of Vorkarian technology giving her an edge. "Communications secured," she reported through their shared comm link. "I'm rerouting emergency channels now." Dennis acknowledged her success as he reached the center of the main hall. A group of Vexthar's soldiers had breached the entrance, their weapons raised. Without hesitation, Dennis launched himself at them. His body moved with a grace that belied his size. He ducked under a plasma blast, feeling the heat singe his hair. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the first attacker, using the Vorkarian's own momentum to throw him into his comrades. The fight became a blur of motion. Dennis's enhanced reflexes allowed him to anticipate his opponent's moves, countering with a mix of human martial arts and Vorkarian combat techniques. He felt a surge of power course through his veins, his hybrid physiology pushing him beyond normal human limits. Across the hall, Lord Zaxnar was corralling key delegates towards a hidden bunker. Dennis caught sight of Krastor, who had positioned himself as a living shield, his massive form absorbing blasts meant for the human representatives. "Dennis!" Tina's voice crackled over the comm. "Vexithar's forces are converging on the command center. I need backup." "On my way," Dennis responded, dispatching his last opponent with a swift strike to the solar plexus. As he raced towards the command center, Dennis saw Marcus and Sarah leading a group of resistance fighters. They had formed an unlikely alliance with loyal Vorkarian guards, their combined efforts creating a formidable defense. Dennis burst into the command center just as Vexthar's elite guard breached the doors. Tina was holding her own, her natural Vorkarian abilities allowing her to match the intruder's strength. Dennis joined the fray, his presence immediately shifting the balance. Together they moved like a well-oiled machine. Tina's technical expertise complemented Dennis's raw power. She manipulated the room's systems, creating barriers and traps that Dennis used to his advantage. As they fought, Dennis caught glimpses of the battle raging throughout the compound. Humans and Vorkarians who had been bitter enemies just days ago now stood side by side, united against a common threat. The sight filled him with a fierce tenacity. A thunderous roar announced the arrival of High Lord Vexthar himself. The Vorkarian leader towered over them, his armor gleaming with an otherworldly sheen. He fixed his gaze on Dennis, his eyes burning with contempt. "So this is the human who dares to challenge the natural order," Vexthar sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Dennis stepped forward, his body coiled with tension. "The natural order is changing," he replied, his voice steady. "It's time for a new era of cooperation." Vexithar's response was a savage attack. His fist, encased in a powered gauntlet, struck with the force of a small missile. Dennis barely managed to deflect the blow, the impact sending shockwaves through his enhanced body. The duel that ensued was unlike anything Dennis had experienced before. Vexthar's strength was overwhelming, each strike threatening to end the fight in an instant. But Dennis's hybrid abilities allowed him to weather the assault, his human ingenuity giving him an edge in tactics. As they fought, Tina worked feverishly at the command console. Her fingers danced across the interface, overriding security protocols and disrupting Vexithar's support systems. "Dennis, I've almost got it," she called out, her voice strained with concentration. "Just a few more seconds." Dennis gritted his teeth, pushing his body to its limits. He could feel the fatigue setting in, his muscles screaming in protest. But he refused to yield, knowing that the fate of human-Vorkarian relations hung in the balance. With a final desperate surge, Dennis unleashed a combination of strikes that drove Vexithar back. The Vorkarian leader stumbled, his armor sparking from the damage it had sustained. At that moment, Tina's voice rang out triumphantly. "Got it! Security systems overridden!" The compound's defenses suddenly turned against Vexithar's forces. Barriers sprang up, cutting off escape routes and trapping the remaining insurgents. The tide of battle had turned. Dennis pressed his advantage, his movements a blur of human and Vorkarian techniques. With a final powerful strike, he sent Vexithar crashing to the ground, the Vorkarian leader's armor shattering on impact. As the dust settled, Dennis stood over his fallen opponent, his chest heaving with exertion. The command center fell silent, the only sound the distant echoes of the battle winding down throughout the compound. Tina approached, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and concern. She reached out, her fingers intertwining with Dennis's. Together, they turned to face the aftermath of the battle, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead in forging a new future for humans and Vorkarians alike.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.